He called himself the Dread Pirate Roberts, a name taken from a movie character who could never die, only be replaced. For years, he ruled an invisible kingdom hidden on the dark web, a kingdom where anyone could buy anything. Drugs, weapons, hacking tools, if it could be shipped, it could be sold. His empire moved hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin, and for a while, he was untouchable. Until one tiny clue, a single forgotten link, connected the king of the dark web to a real person. And that one link brought the FBI to his door. This is not just the story of a crime. This is the story of a man who believed he was building freedom, a digital outlaw who challenged the system and lost everything. It is a story of ambition, betrayal, justice, and the internet's first true king falling from his throne. And today, we're going to uncover how the FBI hunted him down, how they outsmarted him, and how one mistake cost him the rest of his life. San Francisco. October 2, 2013. The Glen Park Branch Library is quiet, almost eerily so. Students study at wooden tables, headphones in, lost in their own worlds. In the back corner, a young man sits with a laptop, his posture relaxed but his mind racing. His name is Ross Ulbricht, though online, he's known by a name whispered with fear and respect, the Dread Pirate Roberts. The entire Silk Road marketplace, the most notorious black market in history, is open on his screen. For 2 years, he has been running a billion-dollar empire from coffee shops, apartments, and libraries like this one. But outside, the FBI is waiting. They have watched him for weeks, tracked his patterns, narrowed him down to this exact location. They know if they move too soon, he will shut the laptop, and everything, the servers, the chat logs, the Bitcoin wallets, will vanish into encryption forever. They have to wait for the perfect moment. 2 undercover agents step inside. They pretend to be just another couple. Then, right as they pass his table, they stage a fight, shouting, pushing each other, loud enough to draw his attention for just a second. That second is all they need. Another agent leaps forward and grabs the open laptop. Ross is yanked from his chair, pushed against the wall, his wrists cuffed before he can react. The empire of the Silk Road collapses right there, in a quiet library in San Francisco. On that laptop is everything. Messages with vendors, lists of transactions, secret journals, Bitcoin wallets holding millions. Around the world, users refresh their browsers to find a single FBI banner where the Silk Road once stood. The king has fallen. The marketplace is dead. But this was more than just a website. It was an idea. And what happens next, the trial, the life sentence, and the fight over whether Ross was a hero or a criminal, would spark a debate that still rages today. If you want to understand how one young man built an empire on the internet, and how one single link led to his downfall, stay with us, because this is the true story of Silk Road, the dark web king, and the day justice came knocking. And before we go deeper, if you love true crime, FBI takedowns, and dark web mysteries, subscribe to iNeurabeat right now. This is where we bring you the stories they don't want you to know, stories that will make you question everything about the internet. But to understand what really happened that day in the library, we need to go back, years before the FBI stormed in, to a time when Ross Ulbricht was just another college kid with big dreams. Ross grew up in Austin, Texas. Friends remember him as smart, kind, a little quiet, and deeply curious. He loved science. He loved solving problems. He was the kind of guy who stayed up late debating ideas, the kind of guy who believed the world could be better, freer. If people were just left alone to make their own choices. After earning a physics degree, Ross didn't want a normal job. He wasn't interested in working for a big corporation or climbing the corporate ladder. He was drawn to philosophy, to economics, to the writings of thinkers who believed in absolute freedom and voluntary exchange. The government, he believed, had too much control, over money, over people's lives, even over what adults could buy and sell. It was around this time that Ross discovered Bitcoin, a strange new digital currency that promised anonymity and independence from banks. To him, it was a revolution. A money system that no government could control. That was the key. That was how you could create a marketplace that was truly free. And so, in 2011, sitting in a small room with a laptop, Ross started to build something radical. He called it Silk Road. A hidden website you could only access through Tor, a special browser that hid your location and identity. It was part experiment, part rebellion. A place where adults could buy and sell without interference. Ross believed this was the next step for humanity, a way to take power back from the state. But Ross knew what he was building was dangerous. He knew that if the authorities found out, they would come after him. So he created an alter ego, a character he named after a cult classic film, The Dread Pirate Roberts. In the movie, the title wasn't a person, but a legend, a mask passed from one man to another, so that the identity of the pirate was never truly known. Ross thought this was perfect. If anyone asked who ran Silk Road, the answer could always be, Dread Pirate Roberts. It was a myth designed to protect him. At first, the site was small. Just a few vendors, a few listings. Ross personally approved each new seller, chatted with them through encrypted messages, even offered advice on how to stay safe. But word spread fast. Users told their friends. Forums lit up with rumors about a new marketplace where you could buy anything, with no risk of being caught. And slowly, Silk Road started to grow. By 2012, it wasn't just a side project anymore. It was a full-blown empire. Thousands of listings. Millions of dollars in Bitcoin changing hands every week. Ross had gone from a curious programmer to the secret king of an underground economy. And with each passing day, it became harder to walk away. Ross believed he was creating something good, something that would weaken violent cartels, end street crime, and make drug use safer because everything came through verified vendors. He even banned things he considered immoral: no child exploitation, no stolen credit cards, no murder for hire. To Ross, Silk Road wasn't about chaos. It was about building a better system. But the bigger the site became, the more dangerous it became. Law enforcement around the world started noticing. People were overdosing on drugs bought through Silk Road. Politicians called it a threat to public safety. The media called it the Amazon of drugs. And Ross, the man who wanted to stay invisible, suddenly became the #1 target of the FBI. And this is where things started to change. Running Silk Road consumed Ross's life. He stopped seeing friends, stopped spending time with family. He worked 16-hour days just keeping the site running and staying one step ahead of investigators. And somewhere along the way, the idealist began to harden. To protect the empire he had built, Ross became willing to make choices he never thought he'd make. The manhunt was closing in, though Ross didn't know it yet. Somewhere in an FBI office, agents were digging through old forum posts, old Bitcoin transactions, looking for any thread that could unravel the mask of the Dread Pirate Roberts. And then, one day, they found it. A post Ross had made years ago under his real name, before Silk Road was even big. In that post was his personal email address, the one link that connected a faceless internet legend to a real man living in San Francisco. And from that moment, the clock started ticking. Once that email address was discovered, the game changed. The mask of the Dread Pirate Roberts had its first crack, and the FBI wasn't about to let it go. Agents quietly opened a file. They didn't storm in, not yet. They didn't want to scare Ross away. Instead, they went to work in silence, tracing every post, every message, every clue left behind on the internet. What they found was a digital breadcrumb trail, one that led through Bitcoin wallets, server logs, and obscure programming forums, and every breadcrumb pointed back to one man. They discovered that Ross had once posted on a website asking for help with some tricky coding issues. The post mentioned building a kind of anonymous marketplace, and at the bottom, there it was, his real name and personal Gmail address. To anyone else, it was just a random post by a curious programmer. But to the FBI, it was a golden thread, the first real link between the hidden world of Silk Road and the man behind it. From that day forward, Ross became a ghost they were hunting. They tracked his movements online, followed his Bitcoin transactions as far as blockchain analysis would allow, and even put human surveillance teams on the streets of San Francisco. They wanted to know who he met, where he went, what he typed. But catching Ross wasn't easy. Silk Road wasn't hosted in the United States, its servers were hidden somewhere in Europe, shielded by layers of encryption. Even if they shut down the server, someone else could start another. The FBI needed something bigger. They needed Ross himself, logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts, caught red-handed. So they waited, gathering evidence piece by piece. Months turned into years. And while the FBI worked in the shadows, Ross kept building his empire, unaware that he was being watched. The Silk Road community had grown to tens of thousands of users. Vendors sold everything from marijuana to heroin, from fake IDs to hacking tools. Every day, millions of dollars in Bitcoin changed hands. And Ross, sitting behind his laptop in a rented room, was at the center of it all. But Ross wasn't just running the site anymore. He was also playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse with people who wanted to scam, to threaten, even to kill him. Deep inside the Silk Road forums, Ross issued warnings, banned dangerous users, and even allegedly paid for hits on people he believed were trying to destroy his creation. Whether those hits were ever real remains debated to this day, but it showed how far Ross had gone from the idealist who once wanted to change the world. Now he was fighting to keep his throne. The FBI knew this, and they used it. Every message Ross sent, every security step he took, every paranoid move, it all became part of the case they were building. They wanted to paint a picture of Ross not as a freedom fighter, but as a kingpin of a global drug empire. And step by step, they got closer. By mid-2013, they had enough to move in. The question was how to do it without tipping him off. If Ross closed his laptop, even for a second, they could lose everything. They needed him alive, online, and logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts. That meant a sting operation, precise, risky, and executed in a place where Ross couldn't escape. They chose a library. Public place. Free Wi-Fi. Easy to blend in. Ross had a habit of working there, and agents knew his routine. They practiced for days, how to distract him, how to grab the laptop before he could hit a single key, how to make it look like nothing unusual was happening. It had to be perfect. October 1st, 2013. The operation began. FBI agents disguised themselves as ordinary library visitors. A couple arguing loudly at a nearby table, another pretending to read a book, one more with a laptop open just a few feet away. Ross walked in, carrying his computer bag. He chose a seat. He logged in. On the screen, Silk Road's control panel came alive. The Dread Pirate Roberts was online. And then, the signal. The fake couple began to argue louder, a distraction. Ross turned his head for just 1 second, and that was enough. An agent grabbed the laptop, spun it around, and kept it open while others handcuffed Ross in his chair. No warning. No time to react. Years of hiding, gone in an instant. When Ross was taken away, the laptop was still running Silk Road. Investigators had the keys to the kingdom. They could see every message, every Bitcoin transaction, every log, all of it live. The Dread Pirate Roberts had fallen. The library went silent after the arrest, but the noise in Ross's mind must have been deafening. Years of paranoia had become reality in a single second. His laptop, still open on that table, was now in FBI hands. His online identity, his empire, his secret life, everything he had built was suddenly exposed to the world. Inside FBI offices, it was chaos, the good kind. Agents scrambled to copy files, trace Bitcoin wallets, seize servers across multiple countries in coordinated raids. The Silk Road was shut down within hours. Its users saw a simple banner: "This hidden site has been seized by the FBI." It was the end of an era. Some celebrated. Others panicked. Thousands of vendors and buyers were left with nothing: no money, no product, no anonymity. But for Ross, it was just the beginning of the nightmare. He was taken into federal custody, charged with a laundry list of crimes: conspiracy to traffic narcotics, money laundering, hacking, even engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, the same charge they used to bring down mafia bosses. To the prosecutors, Ross wasn't a visionary. He wasn't a libertarian rebel. He was the kingpin of a billion-dollar black market, and they were going to make an example of him. In the months that followed, Ross's face was everywhere. News anchors called him the Dark Web King. Headlines read, "Silk Road founder arrested." People debated whether he was a hero or a villain. Some saw him as a modern-day pirate, brave, clever, standing up to government control. Others saw him as reckless, responsible for overdoses, ruined lives, and fueling organized crime. Ross's trial began in early 2015 in a Manhattan federal courtroom. The room was packed: reporters, supporters, and federal agents all crammed together to watch the spectacle. The prosecution presented damning evidence: chat logs from Ross's own laptop where he negotiated with vendors, spreadsheets showing site revenue, journal entries where he wrote about building an economic experiment that had become, in his own words, "my life's work." The defense tried to humanize Ross. They painted him as an idealist who believed in personal freedom, not as a drug lord. They argued that Silk Road reduced street violence by moving drug sales online. They even claimed that maybe Ross wasn't the only Dread Pirate Roberts, maybe someone else had taken over the identity and committed the worst crimes. But the prosecution had something stronger: the story of the one link, the one slip-up, that tied everything back to Ross. They showed the jury how a single forum post, with a real email address attached, became the starting point for one of the most sophisticated digital manhunts in history. They laid out the sting operation step by step, proving that Ross was logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts at the exact moment of arrest. It was a story too perfect for the jury to ignore. And as the evidence piled up, the weight of it crushed any hope Ross had left. On February 4, 2015, the jury returned after just 3.5 hours of deliberation. Guilty. On all 7 counts. But the real shock came at sentencing. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read out the punishment: 2 life sentences, plus 40 years, with no possibility of parole. It was one of the harshest sentences ever given for a non-violent offender. Gasps echoed through the room. Supporters wept. Even some critics thought it was too much. Ross stood there, pale but composed. He gave a short speech, apologizing to his family, admitting he made mistakes, but asking for a second chance. The judge was unmoved. Justice, she said, required an example to be set, a message that no one, not even a genius hiding on the dark web, could escape the law forever. The world reacted. Some called it justice. Others called it a tragedy. Online forums exploded with debate. Was Ross a criminal mastermind who got what he deserved, or a scapegoat for a government afraid of losing control over the internet? And this is where the story gets even deeper. Because even after the fall of Silk Road, even after Ross was locked away for life, new dark web markets rose to take its place. The war between freedom and control, privacy and law enforcement, didn't end that day, it only evolved. And if you're still with me right now, that means you love these kinds of stories, the ones where technology, morality, and justice collide. So before we move to the shocking aftermath of Ross's imprisonment and how the dark web changed forever, hit that subscribe button for Ulbricht. Because what happened next will blow your mind, and you don't want to miss it. Ross was taken away in shackles that day, and the door closed on his life as a free man. But outside those prison walls, something unexpected was happening. Ross had been silenced, but his story had not. Supporters rallied. Websites sprang up calling for his release. They painted him as a martyr, a victim of an overreaching justice system. Free Ross became a movement, a hashtag, a symbol for internet freedom. Meanwhile, law enforcement celebrated. They had taken down the biggest illegal marketplace the world had ever seen. They had proven that no matter how deep you hid on the dark web, they could find you. The banner on Silk Road's homepage, with the FBI's logo and the words, "This site has been seized," became an icon of victory. But the celebration didn't last long. Within months, a new website appeared, Silk Road 2.0. Someone else had taken up the mantle, promising to rebuild what Ross had lost. The cycle began again. Drugs for Bitcoin, vendors and buyers flooding back, millions of dollars changing hands. And once again, the FBI went to work, infiltrating, investigating, taking their time to strike when it mattered most. This is what makes Ross's story so haunting. He didn't just create a website, he created an idea. An idea that couldn't be arrested, couldn't be sentenced, couldn't be silenced. Even from behind bars, Ross became the face of a movement. To some, he was a cautionary tale. To others, he was a revolutionary. Inside prison, Ross tried to stay hopeful. He wrote letters to his family, to his supporters, to anyone who would listen. He shared thoughts about forgiveness, redemption, and freedom. But he also admitted to moments of despair, the weight of knowing he would never walk free again. And outside, technology kept evolving. Bitcoin went mainstream. Privacy tools like Tor grew stronger. New markets, Alphabet, Dream Market, Wall Street Market. Each rose and fell in their turn, some taken down by law enforcement, others disappearing in scams or exit frauds. The game Ross started became a never-ending war between code and cops. For the FBI, Ross's arrest was just one battle. They kept going, taking down site after site, busting vendors, seizing Bitcoin wallets worth millions. But for every market that fell, another would rise. It was a digital hydra, cut off one head, two more appeared. And somewhere, deep in the dark web, new masterminds were watching Ross's case closely, learning from his mistakes. That's what makes this story so gripping, and so terrifying. Because the truth is, the Silk Road never really died. It just changed its name, changed its code, evolved. The question isn't whether another Ross Ulbricht will rise, it's when. And here's where I want to hear from you, yes, you watching this right now. Was Ross a criminal mastermind who got what he deserved, or a visionary who was punished for daring to challenge the system? Tell me in the comments, because this debate is far from over, and your voice is part of the story. And before you go, if you haven't already, subscribe to Ulbricht. Because we're just getting started. There are even darker secrets, scarier stories, and FBI takedowns that will shock you, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Most documentaries would end here, the kingpin caught, the trial over, the sentence given. But the story of Silk Road's takedown has one more layer, one that feels almost like a spy thriller. Because the real question everyone had was, how did the FBI actually find Ross in the first place? The internet believed Ross was untouchable. The Tor network was supposed to make him invisible. Silk Road servers were hidden behind multiple layers of encryption, designed to be unreachable without a direct address. Even security researchers were impressed. For years, no one could find the server. It was like chasing a ghost. But the FBI did find it. And here's where things get fascinating, and controversial. Investigators claim they discovered a tiny leak in Silk Road's login page, a misconfiguration that accidentally exposed the server's real IP address when accessed a certain way. That clue, they said, led them to a data center in Iceland, where the Silk Road servers were physically hosted. In a secret operation, law enforcement made a copy of the server, giving them the ability to see the inner workings of Silk Road without Ross ever knowing. Some cybersecurity experts still debate whether that's the whole story. Some believe there may have been hacking involved, or even help from intelligence agencies. The FBI never fully explained the method, and that mystery only fuels the legend of the Silk Road takedown. But the server was only half the battle. The FBI still needed to catch Ross in the act, logged in, with no chance to wipe or encrypt the laptop. For months, undercover agents posed as drug buyers, communicating directly with Dread Pirate Roberts. They earned his trust, gathered intel, and narrowed down the list of possible suspects until Ross became their prime target. Then came the human surveillance. Agents followed Ross through the streets of San Francisco. They learned his patterns, where he lived, where he ate, when he liked to work. They even staged test runs of the arrest to make sure they could grab the laptop fast enough. Because if Ross had hit a single key combination, he could have locked the device or triggered encryption, and the entire case would have fallen apart. The day of the arrest was choreographed like a movie scene. The fake couple arguing in the library wasn't random, they had rehearsed their roles. One agent's job was just to distract Ross long enough for another to snatch the laptop. A third agent kept the screen active, scrolling through Silk Road's admin panel so it would stay open. Every move was precise. One mistake, and Ross could have walked away free. When they opened the laptop back at the field office, it was like stepping into Ross's mind. Investigators found chat logs where he spoke about the philosophy of Silk Road, his fears of being caught, even moments where he considered walking away. They saw vendor disputes, plans for future site upgrades, lists of trusted administrators. They even found Ross's personal journal, entries that began with hope and excitement and ended with stress, paranoia, and regret. It was in those journals that Ross referred to himself as Dread Pirate Roberts, the legendary name he had borrowed from the Princess Bride. In the movie, the Dread Pirate Roberts is a title passed from one man to another to keep the legend alive. But for Ross, that name became a trap. It tied everything together, the philosophy, the leadership, the vision, and ultimately the downfall. Even Ross's Bitcoin wallets were still logged in. Agents watched in real time as millions of dollars in cryptocurrency were sitting right there on the machine. Those funds were seized, making it one of the largest Bitcoin confiscations in U.S. history. Years later, those Bitcoins would be auctioned off by the government, a strange twist that turned the proceeds of an illegal drug market into taxpayer dollars. This is the part of the story most people never hear, the sheer level of precision, patience, and strategy it took to bring down Silk Road. It wasn't just brute force. It wasn't just luck. It was a combination of technical skill, psychological warfare, and human intuition. The FBI didn't just catch a man, they cracked a puzzle that many thought was unsolvable. And if you're still watching this far, you're exactly the kind of person we make these stories for. The curious ones. The thinkers. The ones who love to see how the world's biggest mysteries get solved. So right now, hit that subscribe button for Ulbricht. Because we've got more stories coming, stories that will take you deeper into the internet's hidden corners than you've ever been before. The Silk Road case remains one of the most important cybercrime stories of our time. It changed how law enforcement approaches the dark web, and it changed how we think about privacy, freedom, and control in the digital age. And maybe that's the most haunting part, Ross's dream of a free market beyond government control didn't die with him. It just evolved. The war between privacy and power is still happening, and somewhere, right now, someone is building the next Silk Road. And if you love stories like this, FBI takedowns, dark web mysteries, and true crime, make sure you hit that subscribe button to Ulbricht right now. Because we might just cover the rise and fall of Silk Road 2.0 next. Tell us in the comments if you want to see that story, your comment could decide the next video.